Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dave Anderson, a Senior Policy Fellow at the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, otherwise known as WIPPS. And for those of you that are joining us live today, you are witnessing history in the making, as this is the first time in the history of our show that I have a guest host to introduce. Our usual host and my colleague, Eric Giordano, the Executive Director of WIPPS, is taking some well-deserved time off. So I'd like to welcome Jeff Mayers as our guest host today. Jeff, would you like to maybe introduce yourself?
Sure, Dave. Great to be here. I'm a WIPPS board member, so that's how I got roped into this in the first place. So but I'm so glad to be here, Dave, because I'm happy to, be with you. I also run WISPolitics.com and WISPbusiness.com, and surprisingly, you can find that at WISPolitics.com and WISPbusiness.com if you on your search engine.
Great. Well, thanks, Jeff, and welcome to our viewers today for what I think is going to be a very interesting show entitled Returning to School During the Pandemic, the Student Perspective. We really have some terrific guests that we're going to be introducing shortly. Just a word of background about WIPPS for those of you who may not be familiar with our organization. We're a unit of the University of Wisconsin system founded in 2007 with a mission to educate and engage citizens, develop future leaders, and bring the resources of the university to address community identified needs. Jeff, since you're new to the show, this is usually the point where I try to upstage and outwit my co-host with a funny pun or joke. But I think I'm going to forego a joke today in an effort to show a little kindness and maybe be a little gentler. But I have to say, for the benefit of our viewers, when I reached out to Jeff, I said, Jeff, we'd like you to be a guest host, but I know you don't quite fit the profile of two bald guys. But now that I'm looking at you on the screen, Jeff, you are thinning out a little bit.
Oh yeah, I got the high forehead going. Yeah, I did that for you. Comb my hair back.
Oh man.
Or I should say my stylist comb my hair.
There you go. Yeah. Well, you know what? You're fitting right in perfectly, and I really appreciate that. I should tell our viewers if they want to give us a hair joke or a pun that we can use in future shows, or if they have some thoughts about the show generally, they can email us at info@wipps.org. And during the live show, viewers can make comments or pose questions to our guests via the Facebook chat section. Jeff, you mentioned you run WISP Politics and WISP Business. Tell us a little bit about what that entails and what that's all about.
Sure, we're nonpartisan news organizations. We're for-profit news organizations. We have subscribers, paying subscribers, and we have a lot of free stuff at the website. We convene a lot of events such as these, done virtually now. And so you can always take a free trial for one of the services by going to the website and signing up for the free trials those last 2 weeks. And so you can see what a subscription is like. And WISP Politics is celebrating its 20th year. So I guess that's something else to brag about.
For those that have any interest whatsoever in public policy or politics in the state of Wisconsin, WISP Politics is, for me, it's my go-to resource. And I've appreciated being a subscriber in one way, shape, or form in the entire 20 years of your existence. So thank you for the great job that WISP Politics does. I want to remind our viewers too that our show wouldn't be possible without our crack producer, Chill Hop DJ, and our paid loyal viewer, Luke Rudolph, who also serves as our producer of the show. And he's we call Luke the token representative of an attractive younger demographic. So Luke, we appreciate everything you do for us.
And he has hair.
He does have hair. He does have hair, indeed. So Jeff, I think we're ready to get into today's topic, returning to school during the pandemic, the student perspective. I wonder if you wouldn't be interested in maybe introducing our guest today.
Absolutely, and the guest should now unmute, right? So, because we're going to be asking you questions. But anyway, we have Aaliyah. She's in middle school in Central Wisconsin. Ethan, who's on via audio, and he's in high school in Central Wisconsin, and Alexis. She's also a Central Wisconsin high school student. So welcome to all of you for being here. We also have Casey Nye. He's the Assistant Superintendent of Learning at the DC Everest Area School District in Marathon County. Hello, Casey.
Morning.
And then we have Sharon Belton. She's the director of WIPPS Research Partners and a WIPPS Senior Policy Fellow. Hi, Sharon.
Hello.
You know, I'm going to start the questioning with a question to you, Sharon. So today's show is focused on students' perspective about their return to school this fall. You recently led an interesting project that brought students together to share their hopes, feelings, and concerns about returning to school. Can you tell us a little bit about the study and what the purpose of the study was?
Sure. Obviously, the top of mind topic this summer has been how schools will reopen in the fall, what their learning models are going to look like, and it's been a very pressing issue on the minds of many school leaders and parents, teachers, and students, not only in central Wisconsin, but across the state and the nation. And one of our roles at WIPPS is to try to provide information and resources that help communities address pressing needs that they might have. And we had noticed that in the various policy debates that were taking place, there was an absence of student perspectives and student voices in the process. And we decided to try to fill that information gap through this project. And we conducted 5 virtual focus groups with 47 high school and middle school students across Marathon County to try to get their insight and perspective about the topic of school reopening this fall. And we conducted those focus groups a couple of weeks ago in early August and are now in the process of getting the information out there to school leaders across the county.
Just a quick follow-up, and without going into too much detail for the moment, maybe you could just touch on some of the key takeaways that you found as a result of the focus groups.
Well, at a very basic level, across the board, the students that we spoke with were very well informed about COVID-19, about safety considerations, and about the challenges that schools were facing with respect to school reopening. But the most compelling theme that we identified that ran across all of the focus groups was a real high level of anxiety and stress related to school reopening in the fall, regardless of what kind of model the school would be approaching, whether it was virtual or on-site or some combination. Students are really anxious about what school's going to be like, how they're going to learn, how they're going to access their teachers, how they're going to see their friends. Not only were they concerned about, safety in general, they had a very high level of concern for safety for other people, their family members, the community, students at large. So it provided some interesting insights into what students are thinking and feeling about this uncertain time that we're about to enter into.
I guess it's my turn. I go back to, when I had kids going to school, I mean, they were anxious going to a regular school, let alone this. So let's ask our students what they think. I'm going to go one at a time to avoid confusion. I'll just call on you. Let's start with Aaliyah. How are you going back to school on September 1? Is it going to be face-to-face, virtual? Do you know?
Yes, my school is going virtual for the first 2 weeks, and if there are still no cases within our school body, we are going to move up to 1 day a week per student and see where it goes from there.
So how are you feeling about it?
I believe that's a pretty good plan, considering it's taking in safety precautions, but it's also willing to bring students back to school because so many kids have difficulty without being in person in order to learn.
I mean, what are your friends thinking? Are some of them scared to go back, or are they anxious?
Some of my friends are anxious, definitely. I'm a little anxious too myself, but I'm excited too, and it's mostly something that we'll just have to see play out.
All right, you're sounding very calm, even though you say you're anxious. So that's a good way to approach it. Let's go to Alexis now. Alexis is a high schooler in central Wisconsin. Alexis, what's the game plan for your school?
So we got a choice for high school to either go back 5 days a week or go back 2 days in person or 3 days on, so 2 days. So we would be going back Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then online Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Okay, so how you feeling about, well, what choice did you take, I guess?
So I'm doing the 2 days in school and 3 days online.
2 days in school, 3 days online. And what days are in school?
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay, how you feeling about that plan?
I'm really liking it. I chose that option too because just in case schools get closed down, which is a really high percentage of that, I'm kind of prepared and I have a schedule that'll have me prepared if we get closed down, but I'm also getting that in person.
So which do you prefer when you're going to school? I mean, you know, your school year got interrupted the last school year. So did you like it the way it was before, or did you like going virtually?
I guess they both had their pros and cons. I kind of liked being at home and doing it because I kind of had my own pace and things, and I didn't have to really stress out about that. And there was more time for teachers to help us, not just all at once, but more individually. But I also liked the in school. At the same time, you know, we had really good student teacher connections. So that was something that we really missed.
Well, good. And so, you know, are you feeling anxious? Your fellow students feeling anxious, or what do you think is the vibe out there?
So our school's not mandating mask wearing, so that's one of the things that are kind of up in the air right now. They're highly recommending it, but they're not mandating masks.
Well, I thought the state mandates masks indoors.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
So,
they may have to, the governor's office may have to contact,
right.
or the health department may have to contact you guys about that. Well, so that makes you feel anxious, right? You'd rather wear a mask?
Yes.
So you're going to wear a mask when you go.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to Ethan. Ethan, you're audio only, I think, to help with your connection. What's the game plan for your school?
Yeah, so our school will be virtual to start until first quarter, and then they will reassess after leave cases up until that point.
Okay, maybe speak a little more slowly. We're still having a little trouble with your connection.
Okay. So our school will be virtual to start, and then at first quarter, they will reassess and see if we can be hybrid or be fully in person or continue online.
Okay, how are you feeling about that, Ethan?
Personally, I'm someone who wants to be back in school. I understand the risk of doing that, but I thrive off learning in person. And also, I am concerned for specific groups like freshmen who have to adjust to high school without having an outlet for help or what that typically looks like. And also those with AP classes or accelerated classes who are trying to retain college level info at a really fast pace through a platform that simply cannot accomplish that.
Are you one of those kids that are taking the advanced AP classes?
Yeah, so in my schedule, I do have some AP classes, but there are a lot of my friends who have full AP classes. So I have a mix of both.
Okay, how are you feeling about that? Would you say you're anxious, or you'd rather it? Obviously, you'd rather be another way.
Yeah, so I would say I'm actually more anxious for the social well-being of a lot of different students who are not in fall sports or extracurriculars because they need to be accounted for as well. And one big thing at school is they just approve fall sports, so that's a nice outlet for a lot of us.
All right, Ethan. Ethan, you're breaking up here. Ethan, you're breaking up, so we're going to have the producer.
Don't maybe have that outlet.
Okay. So Ethan, we're going to have the producer contact you and maybe try to help you with the connection. But at any rate, we're going to turn it over to Dave, and Dave can go to our next guest.
Great. Thanks, Jeff, and Casey. Welcome again to the show. We're really glad you're here. You're kind of you're the lone voice of a school administration here today, and I know every school district has approached this completely differently in a lot of cases. But I've got a question for you to just start things out. What's it been like trying to plan for this year's school year? I mean, I can only imagine what you guys have been going through there. So maybe you could explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I can definitely talk about my own experience, but yeah, no one wants to speak for everyone, right? So I know each district is very unique in terms of what their community wants. And I think the piece that has been more challenging with this moment than any other that I've experienced as a school leader is that the community is so completely divided on this topic. So when I look at either ends of the spectrum around families' perspectives on how a school or a community should approach the challenges that we've got right now, the common denominator on either end is fear. And I think our students really talked about that, the fear of what we're missing if we're not at school, and the fear of what happens if we go back to school and we get sick. And so the challenge to that as a school leader and a representative of the public is you really are trying to meet everyone's needs. And that when you throw that fear in for a really big chunk of our population, the ability to have really thoughtful or calm or coherent discussions about that just erodes so quickly. So I think that if I could identify a theme of challenge that probably exists for everybody, it probably is around that ability to meet everybody's needs when everybody's scared, but for completely different reasons.
Given the approach that DC Everest has selected as we approach the beginning of the school year, what's one thing that you're looking forward to? And what's one thing that causes you the most concern?
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing our kids, and I think I heard them say that here. I mean, although we've got a mix of approaches that we're taking based on families' preferences, in any one of those, the core of just reconnecting with kids and trying to make sure that they get what they need is what we're all about. It's what all educators are driven by. So I'm super fired up about the chance to make that happen, because this has been it's a painful time as an educator when communities aren't equipped to put kids out into their homes in the ways that we had to, especially fourth quarter. So although we're really proud of what our staff did and think we did a lot of things really, really well, and people worked really, really hard, we know that didn't go anywhere near as well as our kids and families need it to go. So the chance to learn from that and come back in a sort of rebooted version, we're looking forward to trying to connect and reconnect with kids.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go to Sharon now. Thanks, Casey.
Yeah.
Sharon, you heard Casey use the word fear, and then you've used the word anxious. What did you hear from the kids when they were talking? How did you assess what they were saying?
I think what the kids were expressing to us was a need for specifics and details about what the upcoming school year was going to be like for them. The personal concerns that they might have had about their safety were really superseded by the larger concerns that they had about how they were going to learn, how were they going to access their teachers if they needed help, would they be able to learn alongside their fellow students? What kind of social support or activities would they be able to participate in school given the COVID situation? And it really just cut across all of the topics that we touched on with the students. It was really a concern for their future. They want to be learning, and that is of a higher priority to the vast majority of the students that we talk to, even of greater importance than COVID itself. Is they want to just be learning from their teachers and with their fellow students.
Okay, I'm going to stay with you here, Sharon. You heard Ethan express concern for fellow students, I guess. And I'm wondering, in your focus groups, there is a digital divide, certainly. Some kids have good internet, some kids don't. Some teachers have help prepping, some teachers don't. And I'm wondering, what is the learning environment going to be? Is it really going to be very different in school district to school district, or what are you feeling? Or what did your study point to?
The students that we talked to really represented a mix of rural environments. We had some students in rural environments express issues that they had experienced related to accessing the internet. Many of them had issues accessing printers. They would have to go to the library maybe to print out an assignment that they might need to complete, but their access to the library during the spring was very limited. And so, you have the rural school environment, presenting challenges in terms of the internet. We did have a number of students indicate that they had, multiple siblings at home, all of whom were trying to get their work done at the same time. And so there were things like that in terms of managing the environments within their families. One thing that students really expressed with respect to learning in a at-home environment was that they had difficulty getting up really early and participating in online meetings with their teachers at 7:30 in the morning or 8 o'clock. And for many of the students, that ability to have a flexible kind of environment associated with a virtual learning situation, extra sleep was really a big bonus for many of them. And they're hoping that when school starts back up in the fall, if they are in a situation where they're not physically on site all the time, they want to balance that independence and flexibility with routine and structure, and not have it be a real rigid kind of environment where they're at their computer from 8 to 3 all day.
Right. I want to ask the students this now. Aaliyah, what about connecting with friends? I mean, school is a place where you connect with friends. You're going to be missing that, right?
Definitely. Friends are so important, just especially for the psychological state of each student. It's really important, and friendship can actually help the student learn better as a whole, just to have that sort of social factor of it. But we are teenagers in modern society. We can text and call our friends. So that's definitely a good thing that we have that, but it will be harder to do in-person connection. And I know that a lot of students crave that.
Okay. Alexis, does social media take care of the void of going to school and meeting with your friends?
So like Aaliyah said, the use of social media is so nice, but it can only do so much. A lot of kids are used to, going back into sports, so they get a lot of that friend time and stuff, or like other clubs. But I think it's going to be really hard, especially with the big percentage of schools being shut down again, or even students not even going back to school at start. So I think it's going to be a very strong mental game for a lot of students and teachers.
What does that mean? What do you mean by strong mental game?
So I think like it's going to be mentally hard for a lot of kids and teachers. I know we talked about this in our groups a while ago. A lot of kids were just feeling so down and depressed. And another student mentioned that the depression levels went super high and suicide rates were very high as well, because we weren't having that socialness with other students and teachers that we needed, especially with a lot of students that were depending on school for their safe place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that's anybody who sees a student or an adult in trouble that way, you need to help them and help get them in touch with the right kind of people to help. And there are some good resources out there. I don't have the websites available, but I think you can find them. All right. I think we lost Ethan. So back to you, Dave.
Casey, a follow-up question for you. So based on what you've seen in the report, what we're hearing from the students here today, and I'm sure other students that you guys have heard from directly, what steps do you think school leaders can take to address the concerns raised by students about the learning environment and their social emotional health? I mean, that's got to be a big area of concern on the part of the school districts, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And the report was super insightful for our leadership team to review and consider. And I get why we've been so focused on trying to do all of the operational sides of this and look at all the data and the recommendations to get school open in whatever format that might be. But I read their annoyance, maybe their irritation with us pretty loud and clear in that report. And I think that's legit, especially for our secondary students. You know, they're young adults, and they're throwing up some pretty clear signals that they want to be a part of that conversation. So I think that's the action. You know, our leaders and our teachers and everybody involved need to be really proactive about having those conversations with kids now. We can't go back and do some of that differently, but I think going forward, every part of the conversation where we can provide choice, where we can do early education and discussion and just talk through what this is going to look like and let student voice inform that. We're really trying to have that filter into all of our next steps going forward. So that's a big part of where we're heading from here.
Thanks.
Okay, Casey, I'm going to stay with you. What about the actual safety protocols? I mean, I heard one of the students say no mask required, which I don't think that's the right procedure. But anyway, you tell me, what are the procedures at DC Everest?
Yeah, well, we live in Wisconsin. So yeah, like you said, there's definitely a statewide order right now that takes that off of it's not a DC Everest decision at this moment in time. But like I described before, people have really different opinions on that, and they live in our community and they go to our schools. So a lot of my work is working with our leaders and working with our principals. So I can tell you they anticipate on the first day, they're going to be calling to work through those moments where kids might not want to follow some of those protocols. But masks are part of the equation for us because that's what the science says is a big part of this. And I don't like wearing a mask, I'll admit that, but I can tell you, if it's going back to a virtual environment and not being able to provide families a choice to come together, I'll wear that mask in every setting that I need to, because I think that discomfort and disruption is so much less. And I think our kids get that too. I saw pieces of that in the report, and I see it in interacting. I have 2 teenagers in my home, and I think they know there's this risk versus reward, or discomfort versus reward. They're smart. They know that that's a piece of the equation, and by and large, they're willing to, go through that and make it work. There are lots of other protocols
Okay, can you just give a couple examples of some of the major things you've had to do? Like, do you space out kids in a room and, you put them in the auditorium instead of a classroom, or, just some specifics?
Yeah, you bet. So we're spacing out wherever we can. We're reducing the numbers, capping classes. The alternating schedules that are in place in some of our buildings are to actually get the numbers down on a daily basis. Staggered start times, soft start times, which kind of gets at a good innovation that Sharon hinted at. Like, kids can sleep in a little bit if we have non-mandatory times that let their brains rest a bit. That helps us get the numbers down, brings people in large buildings in different settings. Different traffic flow in the hallway, not pushing kids to lockers because that's a congregating point, more lunch times. So lots of things along those lines.
Great. All right, Dave, on to you.
I've got a question. This is actually for both Casey and Sharon. Was there anything in the report that surprised both of you, or that you really didn't expect to hear from the students? Sharon, why don't you go first, and then Casey will come back to you.
I was pleasantly surprised with how civil the students were when it came to talking about subjects that were controversial, like masks, for example, or where there were differences of opinion. Unlike maybe the political discord that we all see every time we, turn on the TV or watch the news. The students were very respectful of each other and were able to talk about controversial topics without bringing in any political divisiveness. And it gave me a lot of hope, I guess, if you will, for the future with respect to the generation that we talked to. So that was a really, I guess, unexpected observation from the conversations across all of the ones that we had.
Casey, what did you take away from the report that was surprising?
Yeah, I love that civil piece that Sharon hit on. I think the other part that jumped out at me, and I shouldn't have been surprised, but is that level of empathy that she spoke to earlier. And although I'm really worried about my own experience coming back to school, my bigger concern is what happens to my sick neighbor, to my friend who's immunocompromised, to my grandma, to my friend's grandma. I felt really proud to be an educator and to hear those were the kinds of things that kids were really concerned about. So selfless, but really aware. I mean, they had a really strong understanding of what's going on and could articulate that in a way that was really impressive for young people.
Yeah,
Excellent.
well, the
Thank you.
students give us hope, right? They give us hope for the future. Alexis, I'm going to go to you now. What about all the extracurricular activities? How are those being treated, and do you have concerns about those?
So for sports, so far at my school, it's a go. I haven't really heard about any of the other like clubs or other extra things that we have at our school, and I don't really know the protocols for sports. I actually know that there was a volleyball tournament that was taking place today, and I know that they were wearing masks like in between games and when they're off the court. But other than that, I'm not really sure how our school is taking in place with all that stuff.
Did you have any hesitation to go to a football game or a volleyball game?
A little, especially not knowing what the protocols are for them. So like, mask wearing, like what are gonna be like social distancing, like we don't really know any of the protocols for that yet. We haven't heard anything. So until then, I think there'll be a lot more hesitation.
Aaliyah, what about in your school? What's going on with the band and the sports?
Actually, I go to an alternative school where we don't really have those classes. We go to another school in order to do those things, but I believe that it's a very serious thing because, like I said, with social interactions, these extracurricular activities are very important for the students' mental and physical health when we're talking about sports, for example. But there's also that safety concern because, for example, in bands, that's passing around the instruments and everything that you're putting your mouths on and things like that. And there's a lot of contact within quite a few sports. And that just can't necessarily be entirely safe. And although there's positives and negatives, I really don't know what I would do in this situation if I were to decide what it would be.
What
So
about as a spectator?
Personally, I believe, even though I'm really a fan of extracurricular activities, that I would take it off the list unless it was something that we would be able to do virtually, such as like, although it sounds weird, like a virtual choir or something like that.
Well, they have such things. So yeah, you got to be creative at times like this, right?
I think Ethan has reconnected. Ethan, could you try speaking and answering this? I know you had some perspective on extracurriculars.
Yeah, are you guys able to hear me right now?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, awesome. Glad we can get that to work. Yeah, so our school is doing extracurriculars in the fall, and they just allowed fall sports recently this week. So I was really excited about that. I'm a soccer player, and that's something that I really enjoy. That's a really good outlet for me. And although there is a safety concern, I understand that. But also one nice thing is that for our age group, the contact we have in sports is less of a risk because our age group has less of a chance of getting COVID and dying from COVID. And as far as the coaches go, I know they will be wearing masks and they'll be social distancing, and there are protocols in place for sports that are taking place here that will keep them safe and allow them to continue.
Great. Thanks, Ethan, for rejoining us. Hey, Luke, I think we have a viewer question, don't we?
No, I was just trying to let you know that Ethan is here, and I wanted to make sure he got a
Okay.
chance to answer some questions.
Great. Sorry about that. Sharon, back to you for just a moment. The focus groups seem to suggest that students didn't feel like schools were communicating with them very well about school reopening plans. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit and maybe talk a little bit about why that matters so much?
Sure. Uncertainty about what the fall would look like was a real source of stress and anxiety for the students. And I would say a good portion of them, and this was, keep in mind in early August, didn't know anything related to what their school's reopening plans were going to be. Other students were aware at a very high level about whether they were going to be virtual or in person or some blend, but the details had not yet been communicated to them. And many of the students felt that information that might be communicated to parents wasn't necessarily getting passed on to them. And many students, I think, fully acknowledged that they really weren't checking their school email accounts over the summer and really wanted more direct communication from the school leaders, from their principal or their teachers to them, not using parents necessarily as an intermediary. And what they really wanted opportunities to be more engaged in this process. I think the way that I could best describe it was the students felt like decisions were being made for them, but without them. And they felt like they had a lot of important things to say and a lot of key perspectives that might help provide some insight and want opportunities to engage going forward, whether that be a panel discussion with their principal and fellow students or a regular weekly online forum where they could hop on with the principal and just have an informal chat through other mechanisms to provide input by serving on committees or work groups related to all the planning that's going on.
So I've got a follow-up question to that, but I'm going to really direct this at the students. How do you think your school has been communicating with you as you prepare to go back to school in some way, shape, or form? Ethan, let's start with you.
I feel like our school has done an okay job of communicating with us. I will say that I've learned a lot of info about our fall start from my parents and emails they received. However, I do know the info that I need for my schedule and what fall sports look like. And obviously, with the times we live in, it's sometimes hard to communicate that clearly to the student body, and there is a gray area of communication there. But I will say that it's true that as a student, we're able to see if the school board is kind of tuning into what we have to say based on the actions they take. So there's kind of a level of communication through that.
Alexis, do you want to go next?
Sure. So during the summer, there wasn't really good communication with the students. A lot of the emails were going to my parents or our Facebook page for our school district, which not everyone has Facebook. And during the day, a lot of parents work. So when they got home, so a lot of parents would be forgetting to tell the students the information that they needed. And it was just a lot of questions for students. And like even now, communication is getting a little better. We have a new program called Schoolology that we're using this year, which is going to be better. And like there was an email sent out this morning saying that we should try logging in and stuff. So as far as communication going, it's getting better, like directly towards the students, but during the summer it wasn't so well.
Thanks. Aaliyah?
My school has definitely been doing pretty well with this situation. Of course, it's always difficult to communicate with a whole body of students, and you do need to also tell the parents about these sort of things, especially when it's such an uncertain situation where sometimes the school doesn't even know what they're doing. So how can you tell the students what you're doing when you don't know? But considering all of the obstacles in the way, my school has been doing a phenomenal job.
Great, thanks.
So Casey, a lot of, I think as Leah mentioned, a lot of school districts were late in making up their minds exactly what to do. So what was the DC Everest strategy in communication with students and parents and stakeholders, and how do you think it all worked out?
Yeah, I would say the communication strategy is to continue to get information as we knew it in front of people. But the piece you said before that might be the most important to acknowledge, is that districts everywhere were late in the game in making decisions. because of all the obvious factors that everybody else can, rehash. Those that made early decisions probably undid those multiple times, which is a different challenge. So for us, we purposefully were trying to approach our development process in real time, with the goal always being, how can we make school happen in the safest way possible and be nimble to that changing situation that's happening, and provide families choices, because people are all over the board in what they feel is appropriate. So I would say our team across the board at every level of our organization worked harder this summer and in the last 6 months than they ever had. So I have to give a little bit of acknowledgement to that reality, but we could have done better in our communication with students in particular, especially if a big idea that we have is that we're going to expect personal responsibility to make this work. If we're going to stay open, it's going to take a lot of personal responsibility at the student level as well. For sure, families, things beyond our sphere of control. So going forward, I think we need to do a lot better on that front. And so we have class meetings, with students directly. A lot of it is now deployed to teachers. We've expected our coaches to be advocates, to communicate directly with kids as we've talked about athletics, and try to inform them of where things are going and empower them that, if you want this to happen, these are the kinds of things you need to do to help us get there. But admittedly, we didn't do as well as we could have to engage students. And I understand why, but that isn't an excuse. So we're going to do better going forward.
Right. I've just add the communications toolbox is enormous. You can't just put something in the newspaper, do an ad, or you can't just send an email. You have to, you can't just put it on Facebook. You have to do it all. You have to go to Snapchat and Instagram and everything if you're going to reach all these stakeholders. It is an enormous job. And so I think we're all learning lessons about what we can do, the next time around, but there's a bit of scrambling involved. So anyway, that's a little commentary from me. But anyway, Dave, turn it over to you.
Thanks. And, I can't believe how fast this time goes by. Sharon, I'm going to ask you the last question of the show here today. And that is, what are the next steps for this project? Where is the study going to go from here? What do you see for the future of the work that's been done to really shed some light on an important topic?
I think there would be a lot of value in two things happening with respect to this project. Number one, being able to follow up with the students that we talked to in August, follow up with them again in the fall or early winter and find out, how did the experience go? Did it meet their expectations? What exceeded their expectations? What worked well? And just, continue to get that feedback. And secondly, I think one of the benefits of the model that we used was that we were able to bring together students who probably wouldn't normally interact with each other just based on where they live. And we were able to have students from Colby, Athens, Abbotsford, Mosinee, Wausau, Weston, all in the same place at the same time, and talk about things that they had in common, but also things that they felt differently about. And I would like us to be able to take this focus group model and bring together students from other areas of the state, or from other kinds of learning environments, and try to replicate this and continue to provide information.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. And I want to thank all of our guests today, particularly the students, Aaliyah, Alexis, and Ethan, for being here with us to share your perspective as you prepare for school this fall. And we wish you the best for a great year under some challenging circumstances. Casey, thank you for the hard work you and your fellow school professionals have done, not just in your district, but in districts all over the state, of course, for trying to create that most positive environment you can, again, given the challenges of the environment that we're in. And Sharon, thank you for really some incredible work on this project. And, I think we're just really scratching the surface on how valuable information like this really can be. And I look forward to seeing you back at the virtual office. Sharon and I see each other several times a week on Zoom, participating in a variety of meetings. So Eric told me I had to say this, and I want to once again offer our sincerest apologies to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for running out of time, not being able to bring him on the show today. And we certainly hope he'll be able to join us next week when we come back for another episode of Two Bald Guys. Jeff Mears, it's really been a pleasure working with you today. Thank you for serving as my co-host. I've known Jeff for quite a few years. And it's always a pleasure to see you. Jeff, I don't know if you have any parting hair puns or jokes that you want to share with us, but I'll open the floor.
Dave, when you're a guest host, you never insult the permanent host.
Well, I appreciate that. And, thinking back to our earlier conversation about kind of the fact that I do notice that you're thinning on the top, I was reminded of the fact that when you're going bald, you're going bald when you use more toothpaste than you use shampoo. So there you go. So just something to keep in mind. On that note, I want to thank our guests once again for a really fantastic show. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in and look forward to being back in touch at some point in the future. Thanks, everybody.